Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be going over 5 of my favorite co-mains in Smash Ultimate. Co-maining in this game can be very powerful if done correctly because it allows you to cover some of your bad matchups without having to put in too much work. Generally, you're going to want 2 easier characters, but it is definitely possible to do it with 1 harder character, 1 easier character, or even 2 hard characters. We've seen people like T have success with characters that are very input heavy, but you can still have co-main success with them in bracket. In today's video, we're going to be going over 5 of my favorite combinations that I just think cover matchups well, cover archetypes well, and all that good stuff. So let's get right into it. And the first character combination that I want to talk about is going to be Pikachu and Game & Watch. This character combination is incredibly strong, and Pikachu isn't a character that you necessarily need a secondary for. I would recommend maining him, by the way, if you are going to do this combination, just because Pikachu's match threat is a lot better. But Pikachu's very, very strong, a lot of very good options on that character, but he does have some struggling matchups like Ness and Game & Watch most notably. Some people have also argued like Mario, Pac-Man, Snake. I've seen those in losing, maybe some of these even characters as well. But for the most part, these are going to be the ones you're worrying about, and Game & Watch is Game & Watch, so he doesn't really have to worry about that one, and he does very, very well versus Ness. That is one of his best matchups, so that's already huge bonus. And for the even matchups, he does well versus Snake, he does well versus Peach, he does well versus Mario, he goes even or wins versus Pac-Man and Olimar, and then at worst is going to be even versus Yoshi and Lucas. So that is a very good matchup spread. Both of your like losing matchups are getting covered like super hard. Like Ness is very, very hard. And obviously Game Watch, you might not prefer the Ditto, which is like if you don't like Dittos on characters, then I wouldn't recommend this one because that's probably one you're going to be using Game Watch a lot. But if you don't mind it, I think this is an incredibly strong combination. Even though Pikachu is a character that takes a lot of work, Game Watch is not as much maintenance, so you can definitely have him in the pocket for sure. I think both these characters are incredibly broken and complement each other surprisingly well. And the next character combination is going to be Fox and Cloud. Now, there's not going to be as clean of a matchup spread as Pikachu Game Watch because Fox just loses way more matchups, just like every character in the game. But we have here in the -2, this is our main focus, is Luigi, Game Watch, and Pikachu. I would also argue that Steve and Ice Climbers could both be moved up to this tier. Maybe even Shotos. Maybe Shotos are more like -1, but I think that matchup is pretty rough for Fox. But character that does very well against those characters is going to be Cloud. Now, Cloud does struggle a bit versus Pikachu. I think that matchup is probably losing, and then it is only even versus Shotos winning or even. But then he wins against Steve very hard. He wins against Ice Climbers very hard. It's probably Steve's worst matchup, by the way. He does very, very well versus Game Watch. He does very well versus Luigi. Like, Cloud does incredible in all those matchups. The only ones you're going to have to mainly worry about in this -2 is going to be Pikachu. But there's another character, just as a thought. Game Watch covers all of those. I'm just saying. Listen, I don't want to use Game Watch for every single character thing because Game Watch is a crazy secondary, by the way. But just to mention, I think Cloud is very, very good. He covers a lot of your -1s. He covers a lot of your -2s. The only problem is going to be probably Joker and Wolf or some that slip through. Aegis as well. Aegis he goes even with, and he loses to Joker and Wolf. So those might be characters you have problems with. So those specific characters you're having a problem with probably don't get this combination. I mean, you still could because it's very, very strong, but I'd look for another character. But if you have a problem with, like, basically the rest of these characters, Cloud does very, very well. Pichu as well. Actually, I think Pichu is, like, more even. Pichu, Falco are even. So I think that Cloud is an amazing secondary for Fox. He just covers it so well as Cloud being a fairly easy character. Like, your neutral game is pretty simple. You don't have literally any combos that are hard. None of your kill confirms are hard as well. Like, Cloud is basic to the bone. He is just neutral, which is very helpful because Fox is a bit of a difficult character. Going to need to have some pretty precise combos at the top level as well as getting some secure kills because top players, they're going to know how to look for down air and nair. Like, they know that your kill confirms are. So for Fox, it's going to be a little bit tough. You're going to have to put more time in there to get creative with your kills, but Cloud is a nice secondary to follow, and especially with a character like Steve being so prevalent in the meta. Fox is like struggles pretty hard versus Steve, and Cloud does so well that it just kind of balances out super nicely. I think it's an amazing character combination. Game Watch is good too, don't get me wrong, but we don't want to use Game Watch for the entire video. Come on, that'd be lame. But Fox Game Watch, or rather Fox Cloud, is a very, very good character spread there. I really like this combination. Now, the next character is going to be Wario and Aegis. I think Wario Aegis is really strong, and Aegis overall is just an amazing secondary, kind of like Cloud. You don't need to know any insane combos, and while Mythra does have those insane combos, you don't actually need them. You just kind of need to know how to use her neutral, and knowing how to use Mythra neutral is incredibly easy. Maybe also getting kills with Pyro and like knowing when to switch in between them is the only hard part about that character, but for the most part, it's pretty basic because that character's neutral is insane. Their buttons are incredibly strong. Foresight is always nice, and though the recovery can be messed with a little bit, which isn't great, they are just overall an amazing character for a secondary. And Wario has some bad matchups that they cover very, very well. Like Game Watch, Aegis does very well against Steve and Sora. He does very, or rather they do very well against, as well as Olimar. Like basically the only and the actual losing matchup that Aegis goes even with is going to be Joker. And also something to note is I think Wario loses super hard to Sonic. And even though these matchup charts don't agree with me, I think it's a really, really bad matchup for Wario, but I also think it's one of Sonic's like few arguable losing matchups because I don't think it's losing. I think it is even, but being even versus Sonic is very, very good. So I think overall, Aegis is like one of the best bets you can get with Wario because again, most of the characters that we're going over in this video, it's like the first one that you're maining is like pretty intensive. You're gonna have to be putting a decent amount of work into them just to have like you need to know your strings, you need to know your bread and butters, your follow up, your DI mix-ups, all that kind of stuff. But characters like Aegis, like Cloud, you don't really need to know as much of that stuff. You can kind of just outfund these people, out neutral them, and turn the tides into your favor because of a better matchup. As well as both Wario and Fox hitting with their face, and Aegis and Cloud having the swords. It's a good tempo change. Like I think these characters complement each other incredibly well. You're covering most of Wario's bad matchups, and there's a couple in here that might slip through the cracks. Again, this matchup chart only has Aegis losing 2 matchups, and I do think Aegis loses like Pikachu and maybe a couple other characters, but like Wario does very, very well against Fox. So you're not even going to need to worry about that. We already talked about Sonic. Like, Aegis does so good for Wario, and I think it's an amazing secondary to pick up for them. The next character combination I want to talk about is going to be Game & Watch and Diddy Kong, this time Game & Watch as the main, and I do think that Giddy complements Game Watch super well, even though out of all the secondaries that I have recommended, he's probably the hardest one just because you need to know a lot of stuff, but basically with Diddy Kong, it's like, if you can figure out Z-drop aerials, then you're probably going to do pretty well with that character because the rest of his stuff basically just comes along with that. It just kind of flows right in. If you struggle with item play, then it's probably not going to be your choice, but obviously, like, if you struggle with items, I wouldn't recommend picking up Diddy in the first place, but for Game & Watch, his main matchups that he loses are going to be Swords, Palutena, Diddy Kong, and Zerasu, and you know, the Diddy Kong one cancels out right away, and Diddy does amazing versus Swords. That's kind of what makes him a really good character right now in the meta, because there's a ton of Sword characters running around, and Monkey Flip just makes it so good, because you can kind of play outside the burst range of Swords, but still be a threat to them, which most characters cannot do, and it's really scary, as well as having a good matchup versus Palutena and Zerasu, and then of course there's a Ditto. If you're not a fan of the Ditto, then you don't gotta do it, and then I wouldn't recommend it picking up Diddy. I mean, you still could, because all the other matchups are still very good, but for the Ditto, you always have that Diddy Kong as well, so I think Diddy complements Game & Watch really well. The only may be a big problem of this is Diddy is a little bit harder, as I mentioned earlier, but he's not hard enough to a point where I wouldn't recommend him as a secondary. A lot of his stuff you definitely can figure out if you allow it for a little bit, and he just covers all the matchups so well. Like, Game & Watch has a decent amount of losing matches, but I think other than like maybe Pikachu, at least just off a pure list alone, the matchup spreads that Diddy covers is just very good. I think this is an incredibly strong character combination. I'd also like to mention a couple of co-mains that have had a ton of success at the top level in practice. The first one being most prominently Proto Bonham with Lucina and Min Min. Now, Lucina and Min Min are two very good secondary characters. They're some of the strongest, both top 10 secondary characters. They just like are very easy neutral base. You don't need to know any combos. Have amazing buttons. Like Lucina's killing is amazing. Her out of shield game is incredible, as well as just walling a lot of characters out. And Min Min is literally the queen of walling characters out. She just has these massive hitboxes that are very difficult to deal with. But something that is interesting is that both these characters are hard losing to Greninja. So it's like the matchups themselves aren't covered perfectly. I feel like this is more just like a playstyle thing. They also might both struggle with Pikachu a little bit. Like, not everything is perfectly covered. The same thing with Sheik. Like, Min Min doesn't perfectly complement Lucina, and same thing with Lucina not perfectly complementing Min Min. But the way that secondaries work is just like both of these characters are very easy. They work very well. They're good in the permanent meta or the current meta right now. They have a lot of success, and I think that's something to show that it's like it isn't just the matchup chart. It's also just like how easy are the characters, what are you looking for with the characters when you're just picking them up. If you need to just take a game, the stage that the characters are good on, we've seen Proto have a lot of success when he uses just Min Min on certain stages and Lucina on certain stages, but that segues me perfectly, by the way, into the next one of T and, sorry my mic cut, and it did ruin my perfect transition, but what I was saying is that the character combination of covering stages is very strong with T's Kazuya and his Pac-Man. Now, of course, this doesn't really apply in character bans first, but let's say we're stage ban first just for this hypothetical, because that is better for secondaries anyway. Then you kind of just have to ban FD versus T. You have to, because you don't want to play Kazuya on FT. That is literally a nightmare that nobody should have to go through, and nobody definitely wants to go through. And it just limits your stage pick, as well as just like if Kalos is legal, you're probably going to have to ban that because that's very good for Kazuya. Town and City can be really good for Kazuya, and Pac-Man's other stages are still very strong. Pac-Man has a very good stage list. This character is broken, as well as the characters complementing each other decently well. Like, it's nothing crazy. Like, Kazuya does pretty well against a lot of the like minus like 0.5s that T might have, or that Pac-Man might have, sorry. But it's just more of a thing of Kazuya and T are both, I keep saying T, Kazuya and Pac-Man are both very difficult characters in terms of inputs for Smash. Like, in the grand scheme of things, doing a Kazuya electric combo that kills you at 0, it shouldn't be that easy to kill someone at 0, but compared to other characters that can do 80% by just like short hop forward airing, it is hard to other characters. Then Pac-Man, you have to know like a lot of setups. Your bag of chips actually needs to be pretty dang deep. So for these characters, like, you have to put a decent amount of work into both of them, because if you're not hitting inputs with Kazuya, you're not going to win. And if you're not hitting like bag of trick combos with Pac-Man, you're also probably not going to win, even though you might be able to win with just boxing off him alone and then just good value usage. It is going to be difficult. So this isn't a co-main that can work for everyone. I think a lot of people will not find success with this co-main actually. But the way that T does it is so incredible that I had to mention it because it is way stronger than I ever thought it'd be. Both these characters are both like pretty combo intensive. You need to know what you're doing with both of them. You need to have your DI charts ready and all that kind of stuff. But T figures out, so I thought I would mention that. And now back to whatever I was saying. And the final character combination I want to talk about, one of the strongest in the game, is going to be Ganon and Sonic, because with this character combination, you don't lose any matchups. You do have a couple ones that are even, but at the end of the day, having an even matchup in a game like Ultimate where there's 80 plus characters that's something that you will definitely take. Ganon, you're going to have that win versus Doc, which is super nice. You are going to have a couple losing matchups here, but Sonic covers them all incredibly well. Your biggest ones are probably going to be Pikachu. That might be your main struggle. Pikachu and Aegis, because Ganon struggles a lot with those characters, but it is still even for Sonic. So you're going to want to probably stick to the main of Ganon just because he is a difficult character. You're going to need to focus a lot just because you need to be incredibly tight with your movement. If you are missing a single hit with Ganon, you're probably going to lose that match. You need to make the most out of everything. Whereas Sonic, you kind of just have these invincible moves that you can throw out. You can outspeed people at all times, give yourself the advantage a lot of times. So you're going to want to put most of your focus into Ganon and just bust out Sonic for those lesser favorable matchups, because Ganon does have a couple of them. You know, he is a heavy in this game. Those characters do struggle a bit, but Ganon's strengths are still very, very good. He can kill you very early. He's a good character for a tournament. He just does a ton of damage with his bread and butters. I think this is an amazing character combination. They just cover each other so well. Like, Sonic Ganon is probably like the best cover matchups. Maybe Pikachu Game & Watch is a little bit better, but then also you have to do the ditto with Pikachu Game & Watch, which I know a lot of people don't actually like. So I think Sonic Ganon is an amazing character combination, and I thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'm curious to see what your guys' character combinations are. If there's one that I left out that's super obvious, let me know down below. If there was a matchup that I'm just wrong about that isn't that big of a deal for a character, is way bigger of a deal than I emphasize, please let me know down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a fun one to make, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.